Welcome to Lacrosse Recruiting 101, where the biggest names in lacrosse share their inside views and expertise. Now, your host, Luke Cometti.
In this episode of the podcast, I talk with Craig McDonald, Associate Head Coach for the University of Massachusetts Amherst, entering his sixth season. Prior to UMass, Craig was a defensive and recruiting coordinator at Rutgers University for 3 seasons, D coordinator at Siena College for a season, and was also an assistant at Union College for 3 seasons. In the podcast, Craig explains what the meaning of guerrilla lacrosse is to the UMass program, kind of the legendary story behind it, and even now how they consider it UMass's style of play and how they look for guys who fit that guerrilla lacrosse mold when recruiting. Craig also gives some sound advice on highlight tapes, as well as how to prepare for collegiate lacrosse as a high school player, and even some things that the UMass program and school bring to the table that you're not going to find everywhere. If I missed something or there's something you'd like to hear on the next podcast, then please email us at questions@lacrosserecruiting101.com or tweet at our Twitter handle @LaxRecruit101. Thanks for tuning in. Coach Craig McDonald, Associate Head Coach at University of Massachusetts Amherst. Thanks for making the time to come on here, man. It's always a pleasure catching up.
Yeah, Luke, I appreciate you having me on. I'm excited to be here, and thanks for the opportunity.
Of course. So as I'm preparing for this podcast, I'm looking at the website you guys have, your social media handles, and I see a reoccurring theme of guerrilla lacrosse and hashtag guerrilla lacrosse. And at first I was a little confused because I know you guys are the UMass Minutemen, but after diving in a little deeper, it sounds like it's kind of a cool unofficial nickname for the program. I was wondering if we could start off by you just explaining what guerrilla lacrosse is and kind of what it means to your program.
Yeah, absolutely. It's obviously a big thing for us here on campus and within our program. It's actually funny how it really came about. In, I think it was the 1960s. I don't want to say 65. There was a player on the team whose girlfriend was an artist. And back in the day, those guys wore the big bulky pads.
Oh, yeah.
And he had long arms that kind of like dragged along his ankles a little bit. So she would poke fun at him. She drew a picture of him, and it came out as a gorilla wearing his lacrosse jersey, his helmet, and his holding his stick. So all the guys on the team got a hold of that picture. They made some stickers. They hung them all over the place, and it kind of caught fire from there. The school newspaper caught it and put an article out, and it was at that time became the unofficial nickname was Garber's Gorillas. Coach Garber was the head coach here, and obviously the Gorillas. So that kind of took hold at that point. And the guerrilla lacrosse thing is kind of the team's playing style, right? Back in those days, but even to today. So it's funny that it's been that long.
For sure.
It's funny that it still holds true, but it was all started with a harmless little picture, and here we are.
Very cool. Yeah, and we'll touch on kind of what that style of play is later here, but why don't you give us an update of how the summer went for you guys, and now we're into the fall. You know, where did you end up from a recruiting standpoint in the summer, and what are you hoping to end up at this fall?
Yeah, I think with the new recruiting rules, this is a little different summer for us than probably in the past. And I think it's going to be a completely different summer than what will be this summer moving forward, honestly. But I think we are pretty good throughout the summer in terms of our 20 class, where we were in terms of commitments. There's been a couple shifts, right, here and there in the fall. But we had a lot of guys that had committed earlier in the process. So we had a couple of PGs and stuff like that are going to be in that 20 class. So I think that was a little different and a little unique But I think now moving forward, um, the fall is going to be really important in terms of guys continuing to play into their senior year. We don't have any 21 commitments at this point. Obviously, we've had a good deal of guys on campus, a great deal of interest, but it's something that we want to take our time with. And again, we're going to kind of this upcoming summer, I'm sure it's going to look a lot different than what last summer did for us in terms of the amount of recruits that we had and how many guys that we're going to continue to look at through the end of the summer into the fall before making those final decisions.
Yeah. So when did you get your first 2020 commit? And what did you finish the 20 class? Or
Yeah, we're pretty much finished. We don't ever want to say we're finished, but we're roster cap as a team, so as a program. So there is only a limited amount of guys that we can take a class. But right now we're at 13 guys for a 20 class, and that's probably about the max that we're going to take.
Yeah.
Obviously, certain circumstances, we don't ever want to say we're done recruiting, because if there's a 20 that we see, whether it's bringing them in this year or potentially asking them if they would be open to a reclassification, we're going to continue to recruit guys, and we want the best guys here. So if there's guys that we see that are out there and we think it'd be potentially good fits for us, we definitely want to reach out and have those conversations.
Absolutely. So with that 20 class, when did you see that first commit? And I guess when you saw that first commit, and when did you see that last 2020 commit? And I asked that wondering, will that be the same for the 21 class and potentially the classes moving forward now with the new recruiting rules, or how do you envision that?
Yeah, that's a good question. I think just kind of looking at the guys here, trying to remember the first one that we got. I think it was in the November time frame. Last fall was our first commit.
Okay.
Guys that we had seen in the summer, been in talks with, had on campus, and then I can't remember if it was before we went out recruiting or one of those first weeks, but it was in that late October, right, which is right about now, to early November time frame. And again, I think it could be very similar for this year. We don't have any at this point, right? But we definitely are. We've had a lot of guys on campus, a lot of interest in certain guys, and we're excited to get out there and watch everybody play in the fall.
Yeah, and speaking of guys on campus, you had a prospect day this past weekend. How did that go for you guys? And when you put those on, what are your expectations and what do you kind of hope to get out of them?
We do about 3 prospect day events, 3 to 4 throughout the year. And what we want to do is obviously try to get guys that we're in contact with in terms of guys that we've seen, and try to get them on campus so we can work with them, coach them, and see what they're able to do in terms of coachability, right? We put them through a lot of drills, right? So it's not like you come here and it's just a play day where we're going to roll the balls out and you're going to just scrimmage the whole time. So we put you through what is similar to a practice in the morning time. So we'll do about 3 hours of drills from individual skill development with goalies, face-off guys, attack middies in terms of shooting, and then defensive guys in terms of footwork, positioning, stuff like that. And then we'll build up in terms of some one-on-ones, two-on-twos, some small field stuff, and then get to some more competitive drills, whether it's the old school West Jenny drill, right, the 3-on-2s.
Classic.
Or it's a small field 4-on-3 drill, 4-on-4 drill, 5-on-5. But you guys kind of compete a little bit as we progress into those full field scrimmages in the afternoon where guys are able to play and showcase themselves. But we think it's important for guys to come here and to be coached the way that we coach our players, the way that we run a practice. So we can see if those guys are coachable, if they're able to take those things that we're telling them and apply it to their game, or try try those things out that might be a little awkward, a little new for them. And obviously it's good for them as well to see if they like our coaching style. Let's see if they are comfortable, see if it's a place that they could see themselves, right? Some guys, right, again, I can be a loud guy in terms of, right, demanding, right, energy in a drill and stuff like that, right? So it's, are guys happy? Are they excited about that? Or is it something where they don't really want that type of coaching? So I think it helps in both regards, right? And ultimately, we're going to invite guys, right? Every guy that comes across our board in terms of some emails, right? Stuff like that. But there's a lot of guys that we haven't seen, right? So this is an opportunity for guys that, if they're truly interested in UMass, if it's one of their top schools, this is the best way for them to get in front of the entire coaching staff, right? And to work with every single one of us while being on campus. So I think it's a great opportunity for them. It's obviously a great opportunity for us as well, but we do we do a lot in terms of the coaching aspect of it as well. So it's not just a roll the balls out, because we want to see guys in terms of coachability, and I think that's a big part in terms of guys' development over the next 6 years, right, from juniors to seniors in high school or in college. There's a ton of growth that needs to happen there. So guys are willing to be coached and try some new things. I think those are guys that usually take those steps.
Yeah, it's probably a great gauge for the staff. Not only seeing a different coaching style, but inevitably you're going to be running different drills. They're not just playing; they're also learning and kind of how they react to that change. Because it's probably going to be a very similar transition from if they end up going to UMass and what you're going to see their first fall practices.
Yep. And again, we try to, everything's up tempo, so we don't want to really take too much time between drills. We want to get from one thing to another. So especially we do that in our prospect days. So you see some guys that their heads are spinning a little bit, but they're figuring it out. And again, that gives them an idea of what the practice, the tempo is going to be like, and what the expectations would be like if they were a member of the program. And again, it gives us the ability to see what guys can handle it, what guys might not be able to right now, but who knows? They're 16, 15 years old, so maybe next year, maybe the year after, right? Again, it's good for us to be able to see guys a couple of times and get those evaluations.
Exactly. So outside of your prospect days, when it comes to deciding what events the staff attends, do you find yourself more at recruiting tournaments with club teams, individual showcases, or even high school team events? And maybe what are some of the positives and negatives of each?
Yeah, that's an interesting question. So we will usually, we hit the big tournaments in terms of the club stuff, just as I'm sure everybody else does. But personally, I like watching guys play with their high school, because depending on what club they play for, they might, in their high school, have a lot better chemistry with some of their teammates. You might see them interact a little bit more in terms of the communication, the body language, right? And you kind of see, right, especially sometimes with all the club lacrosse that some of the guys play, sometimes when a high school comes up against another high school rival, even if it's in a summer tournament, those games can sometimes be a little bit more competitive, a little bit more chippy. And you see guys compete. I'm not saying that doesn't happen at the club level. It definitely does. But there's not a ton of the high school team events throughout the summer. So we definitely like to go to one or two of those for sure. It's just a matter of kind of figuring out which one's best, where guys are going to be, who we have contact with at that point, and what team that they're playing for, right? But we definitely see a ton of the club lacrosse who obviously bouncing around. Everything seems to be really down in the Baltimore, Philly, Jersey, Delaware area. for a majority of the fall, right? And then obviously a lot in the summer as well. So we're definitely down there bouncing around tournaments, and it's something that obviously we want to go to those tournaments that we know that have been good for us in terms of recruiting, but it's also just knowing where guys are that we have contact with and following those guys around a little bit.
So those players you do have contact with, where do they tend to be located? Obviously a state school in Massachusetts. Do you have a lot of guys that are close to home that you're trying to recruit, or do you guys like to branch out and just kind of fit that mold, that guerrilla lacrosse mold? Essentially, doesn't really matter where they're from.
Yeah, I mean, just in terms of where our team is usually made up of, it's usually majority Northeast. In terms of Massachusetts, right? We get New York, New Jersey, Connecticut, New Hampshire, Rhode Island. But yeah, we got guys from all over, and there's really good lacrosse players all over the place. So we're going to go out and try to recruit the best guys and the best fit, like you're saying, in terms of guys that could be good for our program and for the type of lacrosse that we play and the style that we play. It's more so about finding the right fit than a specific high school or a specific club, or even anything geographically. It's just we want the guys that are the right fit for us, and that's part of obviously what we look for when we get out there.
Yeah, obviously makes sense. So now I want you to picture this scenario, right? You're on the sideline this fall at a recruiting event, probably late November up in the Northeast. Got a couple coats on, pair of sweatpants, probably even long johns because you're a veteran. And you're watching a game and boom, player catches your eye and you think he'd be a good fit for the program at UMass. What's going to be that first initial thing that stood out to you and caught your eye?
Sounds like you're explaining the Tully Cornfield Classic. The old
playing that plenty of times.
Yeah, no doubt. Every day, it can be like 60 degrees, and I drive up there and it's snowing. So
yeah,
I hope this year that's not the case. But obviously to answer your question, I think it's going to be a bunch of things that stick out. But usually the guys that stand out for me, and honestly, I think I can speak for other coaches on staff as well, is just guys that have an unrelenting will to compete, that have toughness and just have a great motor. Obviously, the skill sets, right, the speed, the athleticism, those things usually stand out in some of those elite recruits. Some of those high end guys that you go to a field and you just kind of pull up your chair and like, wow, look at that guy.
Yeah,
right? Those guys
notices him. Yeah.
Exactly. They stick out. They're pretty easy to find, but and again, the way that we play and really kind of what our MO has always been is we don't necessarily get a ton of those highly ranked recruits, for lack of a better word. It's more guys that are under the radar, more guys that aren't really highly recruited. And it's some guys that, again, for us, in terms of how we coach, right, how we compete daily in practice, and how we play and how we want to play, we really need those guys to have those three things: that unrelenting will to compete, the toughness, and the motor, to be able to excel here. Right? And obviously, there's a lot of other things that come after that, right? But those are the three things that are really non-negotiables for us. Just because, in terms of, again, we know what our expectations for guys are throughout a practice, a week, a month, a fall ball, and then it's a long year for these guys. So we need guys that love to compete and are willing to put it out there every single day.
Yeah, and as a high school or even a youth player desiring desiring to play at UMass or any high level of collegiate lacrosse, what is something you would tell them to focus on? And I say that, and like, is there anything that you see maybe lacking amongst players at recruiting events now?
Yeah, so are you saying young guys or high
Young
school
guys
guys?
that are, wanting to play in college lacrosse. What is something that they can work on now so when they get to that recruiting stage, they can catch a coach like you? You can catch your eye.
Yeah, I just think again these guys play a ton of lacrosse. So for me, it's the amount of lacrosse that they play. It's not the guys that get caught up in the results, right? So guys
Yeah.
that don't score the goal, right? Um, the head hang and the body language, as opposed to riding the ball back, right? Guys that get maybe beat on defense, right? That again, body language, and they're not able to really get themselves into the next play and get a ground ball for their team or communicate to their teammates. I think that's something that with all the lacrosse that they play is bound to happen. Right?
Yeah.
They're bound to, not everything is going to go their way all the time, and that's okay. Right? It's the things that we talk to our guys about this all the time. It's like we want to control the things that have nothing to do with actual lacrosse skills. Right? So we want to control our energy, our effort, and our attitude. Right? And I know a lot of people talk about that, and it's so true. If you have those three things, it's impossible for you to have a really, really bad day because you're going to have so many opportunities in lacrosse to make another play, to make up for something that might not have gone your way the first time. That you're just going to be in the right place at the right time, and you're going to be ready for it. So that's kind of what I would tell those guys is you'd be amazed how many coaches will maybe not even know somebody, but they'll see something like that, a bad body language, right, palms up, right, sulking, whatever it is, and they'll just cross you off the list, which is again unfortunate because with all the lacrosse that you play, right, it might be one time, but
Yeah.
you never know who's watching. And again, you play so much, the attitude to get the next play is so important because it's not going to be right, palms up, right, sulking, whatever it is, and they'll just cross you off the list, which is again unfortunate because with all the lacrosse that you play, right, it might be one time, but you never know who's watching. And again, you play so much, the attitude to get the next play is so important because it's not going to be perfect, and you're not going to get every single play.
This episode of the podcast is brought to you by Iron Horse Lacrosse, the #1 lacrosse program in Texas for travel teams, camps, and clinics. For more information on Iron Horse, visit their website at www.ironhorselax.com. Yeah, I mean, controlling what you can control, that even goes beyond lacrosse.
Exactly.
And it's great that you mentioned the result. Don't get too hung up on the result because, coaching club teams, you hear players and parents really always talking about the score. How good's the team. I mean, I imagine that when you're watching a recruiting event, how often are you looking at the score of the game?
Not very often. Most of the times, honestly, the ones that go to a championship, I don't pay attention really. And like the next day when they go from either you're in the winner's bracket or the loser's bracket, I'm just going to watch a team. Like I'm not worried about if they won or lost, and I'm not worried about what the score is. I want obviously just to want to see you guys compete. So I don't know half the scores, right? Probably more when I walk up to a field, and I'm not going to go over and ask the guy on the table what the score is. So.
Exactly.
Yeah, I don't think it's that important. And again, I just think it's, and I understand, right, the competitiveness, and that's like we're all competitors, right? That's why we do this. But you want to be competitive in terms of, especially with the club stuff and how much these guys play. not about winning a trophy or anything, but it's about competing for your teammates. And you might do that really well, and you might see failure. You might not win, right? And then other times, right, you guys might not compete really well, and you still might win a game. So it's something that you can't really base it on those results, because if you're thinking about those things throughout it, then you kind of focus on the wrong thing.
Exactly. What about highlight films? In your opinion, do you need one to get recruited? And if so, when do you think would be the right time to make one as a high school player?
Yeah, I think it's important. I think it's good for everybody to have. I do. But as I say that, we don't go off of any highlight film just by itself. So
Yeah.
we need to see guys play live, right? And again, for some guys, we're in Massachusetts, right? So some guys down in Texas, that might not be until we can't get down there for the spring to watch you play, right? Because it's in season, that's when you guys play.
Yeah.
But you have ability to stream games. You have ability to send a full game, right, for us to watch. And then obviously those things help. And then as soon as we'll have an opportunity to see you, whether it's in a summer tournament, whatever it is, we're going to try our best to be there, right? And again, that's tough because we recruit a lot of guys, and a lot of guys have interest in us. But I think the best way to make sure you're in front of a coach and continuously in front is to have those highlight films. And I would have some, whether it's full games or half game footage as well, just so they have that as a little bit of a reference in terms of looking back as well.
Yeah, I can see why you would want to see a half game or full game of footage because you actually get the whole picture, right? You don't see everything in the highlight film, you see the highlight.
Exactly.
I can also imagine that being tough for a staff to stay on top of a bunch of game film, if you're trying to recruit 100 players. I mean, you guys probably don't have the time to watch all of it.
Yep.
So how do you kind of balance that?
Yeah, and we don't have the time to watch all of it, to be honest. But again, it's something that we're going to do our best, right? And those guys that we have the best communication with are going to be the ones that we probably give the priority to in terms of watching those games. We get emails, hundreds of emails, right? Yeah. Daily, weekly, whatever it is. So it's impossible for us to watch all of the full game footage, right? But most of the things that come across our desk, we'll watch some of the highlights and we'll see. Again, you can tell usually in the first couple of minutes, a couple of seconds, honestly, if a guy is right for your program or not, off of a highlight film in terms of what play they put out there, even the music, right?
Well, that was my next question, right? Has music or lack of music in a highlight film ever helped or hurt a player trying to get recruited in your experience?
No. I think it has to be like pretty egregious one way to hurt a player. I think music's music, right? So everybody's their own person, right? But if you have something on there that maybe has a lot of swear words and it's not edited, it's kind of a little bit more of a red flag than anything else. But
for sure,
music is everybody's way of expressing themselves to a certain extent. So I don't think it hurts anybody. But again, that there's been a couple of times where it's come across the desk where it's been a little unedited, and it just takes you back a little bit.
Absolutely. So, how many times do you typically watch a player before you really start to pursue them? I'm sure it changes, but what is maybe the average time you will see a player live before you're trying to get them on campus and potentially talking about joining the program?
Yeah, I would say for us, we want a couple of guys on staff to see him. So if we're all at the same place and we all watch him play in one event, Sometimes that's enough for us to get him on campus. Now we're probably going to try to watch him again before making any final decisions.
Yeah.
But sometimes it can be that quickly. Other times it's a process. And again, I think that's something that people have to, the students have to understand is some guys go fast, some guys go slow, but you're going to find a home. There's going to be a place for you that's right for you. And for us, we all want to see him play at least once individually, right? And then again, if we all see him together, we'll probably try to see him two, 3 times before we make any type of final decision.
Okay. And what do you want to see from the player that you have showed interest in? Like what do they need to do on their end?
In terms of play or in terms of
not so much
off-field
play,
stuff?
but maybe you reach out via text or you call them or you email them. How
Yeah,
should they
I just
be responsive? How much interest should they show, or how much contact should they have with you? Probably depends
yeah, I
on the
think
age, but
yeah, it depends on the age, right? So we can't have any contact with anybody that's younger than a junior um, right now. So anyone that's 2022, we can't have any contact with
yeah,
until September 1st of their junior year. So we can send them um, any camp and clinic information and a questionnaire, and that's all we can do. But for anybody else, it's um, again, it's something that we're pretty truthful with all the guys that we're recruiting in terms of where they stand with us. So the one thing, and this happens a lot, is we've done this for a while, right? All of us. So you can tell when guys are being truthful with you back.
yeah,
And again, if you're truthful, right, we respect guys a lot more than if we feel like maybe they're not telling us the truth about something, then it might not be the right fit. Because we would rather have someone say, you know what, UMass might not be the right place for me, or I'm looking at some other places. I just want to be honest with you. Right?
mm-hmm.
We can. That's fine. Right? Again, we can like somebody a ton. Right? If UMass isn't the right place, it's not going to help anybody if they decide to come here. So
Exactly.
um, I just think it's important for hopefully, right, most coaches that they're talking to are going to be very truthful and forthright with them in the process. Right? So hopefully those guys are giving it back to them as well.
Do you have any advice for parents and their role in the process, or like what do you
Yeah,
typically want to see from the parent
yeah. I mean,
without overstepping? I guess.
yeah, I think the parents are really important in the process. I think it's something that they have to be there to help guide their sons in terms of making the decision and getting them onto campuses and seeing places. We recruit families sometimes almost as much as we recruit the individual player. Right now, the other part of that is this is their process. This is the player's process. Right. So you talked about overstepping a little bit.
Yeah.
We want them to be extremely involved, but we've all had our experience at college, and we've all made our decisions and lived our life through that. This is their time to find out what is the right fit for them. So UMass might be the right fit for a player's parent, but might not be the right fit for a player, or vice
Yeah.
versa. Right, so it's kind of weighing that option and understanding that this is a process. We encourage people to see multiple schools, meet with multiple coaches and players because it's a huge decision for them. And the last thing that we want as coaches is for guys to come here and realize after the first 2 weeks that this isn't the right place for them. Then we didn't help them out, and obviously they're not helping us out, and it's not working for either party. So it's a really important decision, and it's not something to rush into. I know there's people feel a lot of pressure for the recruiting process, but the players are the ones that are in control of the whole thing. And so
Yeah.
if somebody likes you in September 1st and tells you that you're their guy, what's going to change from September 1st to um, say May 5th? All of a sudden you're not their guy anymore, right? I think guys have to be able to make their own decision in terms of the right school academically, socially. Lacrosse, obviously, every place they're visiting, right? Lacrosse is
Yeah.
the main reason they're on campus, right? So I think those other aspects of it are really, really important. And I think they have to take their time with the process. And I think the parents can really help them in doing that, in knowing that they're in control and they can go at their speed, however they want their speed to be. But they're going to find a great place.
Yeah. So you have a 2021 commit, let's say tomorrow. What are your expectations from him or of him from now until he steps on campus in the fall of 2021? Like, what do you want to see him doing and how can he prepare?
Yeah, our expectations are for him to be a great example and representation of UMass, obviously, but of his family and his high school and his club, whatever he plays for. So he's still got 2 years before he
Yeah.
steps on foot at UMass. So if he's not giving his best effort academically, socially, and obviously sports wise in terms of whether it's lacrosse, football, whatever it is, um, we're probably going to hear about that. That'll probably come back to us, and that'll be something that we will not be happy with. Right? You got 2 years that you have a commitment to your high school, your club, your family, that you need to make sure you're taking care of that obligation and you're doing it to the best of your ability. And we expect you to compete, be a great teammate, right, and great leader, and see those commitments through.
And you're essentially representing UMass as well. Everyone
Yep.
knows, everyone's proud of their commitments. They blast it out on Twitter. Everyone thinks of UMass lacrosse. They think of that player, even if he's 2 years out.
Yeah, and exactly. But it's that's definitely part of it, right? But I think it's sometimes when guys commit, especially early 2 years out, they kind of just forget that they had commitments and their parents have helped them along the way in terms of commitments with clubs, with high schools and all
Yeah.
that stuff. And they just let those 2 years kind of fade away and kind of just breeze it by a little bit. And we want guys that are going to get better in those 2 years and
Mm-hmm.
be great examples, not just for us in our program, but for them because they want to.
Yeah. In your experience, what's the hardest thing for players transitioning from high school to college? And anything
Yeah,
that high school players could prepare for right now if they're listening.
I think it's a different probably list, and I think everybody's a little bit different. Um, but probably the two things that I would say a majority of the time have direct correlation with success or struggles early on in their freshman year are time management skills
Yeah.
in terms of academically, um, athletically, and then knowing that socially that is the least of your priorities in terms of the time management. Um,
Yeah.
I think the guys that are able to that have that coming out of high school, and so some guys, probably the guys that are most ready for that in terms of time management are guys that do a PG year, a postgraduate year, because they're away from home. They're taking similar courses. Their days are set up similar, so they have a little bit more free time, and they're made to play or be a part of three sports. So they're busy all the time. So they have to manage their time. And those are the guys that academically, with athletics, more of a seamless transition.
Yeah.
So obviously that would be one, and then It's probably, you're going to think it's funny saying, right? Because they're coming here to play lacrosse. But if guys are in really poor shape, running shape, conditioning shape, it
You're
makes
not
it
the first coach to say that.
extremely hard for them. So those would be the two things that I would say are the most important to early success. And again, some guys are different, and some guys it's pretty seamless. Some guys can be great in both in terms of time management and great shape, and it's still a little bit of a struggle being home, away from home, and stuff like that. But I think those are probably the most consistent things that we come across.
Yeah, and it's funny you mention players being in shape because that's kind of the one thing you can definitely control, right? You just need to
Yep.
get out there and run and play. And it's still, right? Summer after senior year, a lot going on socially. They don't have as many athletic activities that summer because they're not in high school anymore. And I can see how that can kind of be a slippery slope.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's why, again, it's kind of knowing who you're recruiting a little bit in terms of, and it's a tough thing, right? But usually multiple sport guys that play multiple sports will probably be in better shape when they come in just because whether they're going out and running, they're used to doing something all the time. So
Yeah.
they're not used to downtime, right? So even if it's going out and playing pickup, something, they're doing something. So I think that's something that we see those guys that play multiple sports that are a little bit more motivated in that downtime.
Yeah. So, what are some of the things that UMass brings to the table that you aren't going to find at every program and or every school? And one thing that comes to mind for me is Garber Field. I played there as an opponent, leaving the locker room, walking down the stairs, down the hill, getting heckled, just kind of playing in that unique atmosphere. That was pretty cool. And it's a venue with a lot of tradition. But maybe touch on that and what else UMass brings to the table that you won't see everywhere.
Yeah, I think you hit it in terms of number one is Garber Field. The tradition, right? It's a unique place because it's in the middle of campus. So it's surrounded by classrooms, and there's constant foot traffic coming through. So there's constantly people around.
Yeah.
Again, it's someplace that on game days, it's a lacrosse only facility. It's pretty tight. So when we get a couple thousand people in there, it's very loud and people are right on you. So it's a
Not
very
an easy
exciting
place
to play
as an opponent.
Yeah, exactly. So and we hopefully it's come a winter sport now. So hopefully the weather will be nice to us in early February so we can get some more people out there. But obviously that's a special place for us. It's also a special place for us because it's a perfect example of the program and the support that we have through our alums, our lax backers. They've raised over $600,000 4 years ago for a brand new turf field, and then they just raised over another $600,000 for a brand new scoreboard that just got put in the summer.
Nice.
So we're constantly improving that facility, and it's through the donations of our alumni group that obviously support our guys while they're in the program here. They've also fundraised for our locker room, film room, our stands, right? So everything that we have is a result of that alumni support. And they also do a great job in terms of supporting our guys in terms of internship opportunities, job opportunities, and then future, right? And after your 4 years here, job placement. They do a fantastic job of taking care of our guys. Right? Our guys are actually going to New York City on Friday to do a networking event down in the city and meet with 8 different alums, right? Different sectors, and talk about their jobs, right? Talk about the process in terms of internships to some of our younger guys, the job process in terms of guys that are graduating. You have a couple guys that already have jobs, so they're going to go there and just kind of pick those guys' brains. So it's just a great event, and our alumni are just fantastic in terms of that support when you're in the program, and then obviously your future. So, and then on top of that, right, the lacrosse program it speaks for itself, right? I'm extremely privileged to be a part of it. Coach Cannell is a fantastic coach, mentor, right, for me, right? But he's done a fantastic job in terms of his 26 years here. At countless All-Americans, right, conference championships, and the players that have been put through here kind of speak for themselves. And then obviously the school is increased every single year in terms of the national ranking. So we're number 24 ranked public school in the nation. We have a number one public business school in the Northeast in Eisenberg. And I was in that public business school, right? We're the number 7 in terms of recruiter satisfaction. So that's out of all business schools. So
wow,
that's a big number.
Yeah.
And that says a lot about the people that are coming out of the program in terms of the job placement and how successful they are. So that's fantastic. And then we have the number 1 ranked sports management program in the world, which is also part of Eisenberg. Our hotel management program is top 5 in the country and part of Eisenberg. And so that Eisenberg hosts 7 different majors for us, and that's something that is really important in terms of our recruiting process. We have 44 players on the team, and 22 of our 44 are in Eisenberg in some facets. So that's half of our team. So we're recruiting very good student athletes to be in there. And then again, we have the number 1. This is probably the most important for all the high school kids out there, right? But number 1 ranked on-campus dining in the nation for 4 years in a row. So it's
nice.
Very, very impressive. It's not what me and you ate in college, that's for sure. And then just the convenience in terms of where our guys are. So Garber Field, our offices, our locker rooms, our weight room, our training room are right behind it in the building. And then their dorms are about 150 yards away. So they're going to be in that little triangle for about 80% of their time. And campus is designed where everyone walks into the middle of the campus to go to class academics. So
perfect.
Being a bigger school, we really consider ourselves a medium school in terms of acreage. There's no roads that go through campus, so everyone walks. 10-minute walk is about the furthest you're going to have. And the convenience that we have for being a medium-sized school is fantastic. And also have Division I football, basketball, and hockey, which is where you're going to get that big school feel. Our hockey team is number 4 in the country right now. They went to the national championship last year, so those are some great games to go to. But
sure.
Yeah, it's a fantastic place to be. Obviously we like it. Right? I've been here. This is my 6th year. Right? Coach Cannell has been here 26 years, and Doc Snyder's been here. I think this is his 11th year as a coach after playing here. So obviously it says a lot about the place that everyone stays and wants to be a part of it.
For sure. And Craig, great info, great advice. I'm going to leave you with one final question here. If you had every future UMass lacrosse player who's coming to play for you listening to this podcast, what would you say to them?
Interesting. I would just say
take it any way you want.
Yeah, no, I think it's a process. The 4 years, right, when you're here for the recruiting process, it's all something that hopefully you're only doing once, and you're going to get out of it what you put into it in terms of your energy, your effort, academically, athletically. It's all related. So I would just say enjoy it, no matter how hard it may seem at times. It will be worth it if you persevere and push through. And if you come out to practice every day with a great attitude, great energy, and being a great teammate, you're going to continue to prove every single day and leave here as a senior the best lacrosse you're playing in your life, right? But more importantly, leaving here ready for the real world, to go and get a full-time job and start your life, be a husband, a father at some point. We really take great pride in making sure our guys are ready to leave here and are ready for the real world when they depart.
Well said. Well, Coach Craig McDonald, UMass Lacrosse, once again, thanks for taking the time, man. It was a pleasure having you on. Bunch of great info, and I think people listening to this will learn a lot. Awesome.
Yeah, appreciate it, man. Thank you for the opportunity. It's good to catch up with you as always. And yeah, thanks. Had a good time.
Thanks for listening to Lacrosse Recruiting 101. Catch us on Instagram, Facebook, and Twitter. Have a question for Luke? Email them to questions@lacrosserecruiting101.com.